Today I am going to compare 13 different starches or starch-like products that you can use on fabric, and as a control against those, I am also going to use plain water. Okay, so to do this test, I need a bunch of half square triangles, and so I have a bunch that I have made here. I think I actually have 16, so I only need 14. And so the reason why I am doing it this way is I want to have black fabric, and I want to have really light colored fabric. This is actually an unbleached muslin that I'm using here. And what I will do is I will go ahead and press these open, and I will take each one of these starching methods and show how to set it up, and then show using it to press it open, and then review how these things worked out. Alright, so for the first piece, this is going to be the control, and the control is simply distilled water, and so it can be distilled water that's steamed from the iron, or distilled water from a spray bottle like this one. So I'm just going to do that, and then just take my iron and get that pressed. Okay, alright. And then do that. And then this is just a piece of wood, and it's basically being used as a tailor's clapper. So basically what that does is it's an immediately cool thing going against that hot fabric that was just under the iron, and it helps those seams stay meticulously flat, as you can see there. So for the first method, I am going to go with the Niagara starch. It's by Faultless. This has been a go-to for me for the last 10 years. And actually, I've had trouble finding this in the stores. This is a bottle that I've had, I think, for probably 5 or 6 years. So that's just a simple press to keep that way. And then, oops, there we go. That was actually quite a lot there. Let's see, trying not to... Okay. So if you're trying to do a bigger piece, probably not as messy as what I just demonstrated there. But, okay, and see, it's stuck to the iron a little bit there. And you can see there's quite a lot of residue. That's because I had so much come out of the nozzle. I don't usually find that this has a lot of residue, so I'm kind of surprised right now that this is doing this. But it is a really nice, super flat type of pressing. So I'm going to go ahead and just write down with a friction pen, and basically kind of going into the seam allowance so I can still use these. So this one's the Niagara, and this one is just water. Okay. For the next one, this one I was able to find in stores everywhere. It's the Faultless Luxe Finish. Let's see. Okay, so instructions. Spray evenly at a 45 degrees from 8 inches away. That's pretty far away. And then, does it say anything about shaking? I don't see anything about shaking this. Okay. It's got a very floral kind of a scent. Okay, so now go ahead and try this. So far this is actually pretty nice because I don't have any residue on the black, but I feel like it doesn't feel much different than just being the basic fabric. So I'm going to try this again. There we go. I feel like I'm getting some liquid on there now. I'm getting indentations of my ironing plate. Okay. Oh, yeah, this is very stiff. Okay. Alright, so that is the Luxe Finish, and It seems like it's really nice for dark fabrics. I don't have a bunch of residue. So I'm going to put down Luxe for that one. Okay. This one is a very popular one, the Mary Ellen's Best Press. And you can easily find this in Joann's. I actually got it in my local quilt shop for a pretty good amount cheaper, a few dollars cheaper than what Joann's was selling it for. And it's also easy to find online as well. This is a scent-free one. So for anybody who can't handle fragrances, maybe that's a good option. Because I noticed that both of the Faultless brand starches have a pretty powerful fragrance to them. Okay, so I have a paper towel down because I was noticing that I was starting to really get some overspray residue. And I want this to be a really, really good test. I'm going to take the Mary Ellen's and I have to turn it on first. Oops. Most of these methods I've never tried before. This is something that I just bought along with the Faultless Luxe. Very curious to see how these stack up. Okay, I think that's dry. Okay, so this has more of a hand to it. That's to press. For the next one, I'm going to use Terial Magic. This is something that I decided to get after I saw this demonstrated at a quilting expo. And I know you can get it on Amazon. I might have actually bought it on Amazon, or I bought it at the event. I can't remember. It was years ago. So I did like a little spritz on a spare piece of fabric here of this Terial Magic, just to get the nozzle activated. And as you can see here, it's really, really quite stiff. And so this is a very, very stiffening type of spray. It's a very heavy starch. Okay, oof. That was a lot. I'm trying to get it to, there we go. Okay. And this one's not as strong of a smell, but there is a little bit of a fragrance to it. And then, oof, definitely sticks to the iron. Okay. Okay. Nope. So as you can see, there is just a tiny bit of residue that ended up on the black. This is very paper-like. It's almost like it's cardstock at this point. And that's actually what the product touts, is that it will make fabric have a paper-like consistency. And so that can be very useful if you want to make sure that you don't have a problem with bias. See, there's no give there. See, well, there's actually a little bit of give there because I didn't have it there. But along the seam there, there's not really give. And so that is the Terial Magic. Okay, Terial Magic. This next one is something that I found at the Joann's, and it's called a fabric stiffener. And I'm guessing that this is going to operate similarly to the Terial Magic. It does say to shake well before use, and it says to stiffen. Okay, cover the damp fabric with parchment paper and iron on medium heat until dry to the touch. And then it is like some kind of a shaping thing as well that I guess you could do if you wanted to shape it like around something. It says that you can keep applying it if you need the fabric to be even stiffer. All right, so I have some parchment here, and then let's get this prepped. And then it says to shake well, so let's go ahead and shake it. Okay. Oh, okay. This kind of got a little carried away there. Let's see if I can get that spread around. Okay. Okay, and it said to use parchment, so we'll use parchment. Okay. It is pretty stiff on the muslin part of it. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say it's equally stiff. So that one is the Spray and Bond Fabric Stiffener. Okay, Spray and Bond. All right. Okay, for the next one is this Downy Wrinkle Releaser. This is actually something where they say that you don't have to iron fabric, but on their website, they do say that the best results are if you use it with a hot iron. And this I found in the travel size, so this could be a really good option if you are traveling. Okay, I had to do quite a few sprays to that to get that saturated pretty well. And this has a very strong fragrance. Okay. Okay, so this really does not feel like anything has changed with the fabric in terms of the hand. I could still stretch the fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more soaking of this to see if that improves anything. That is a very strong fragrance. Oop. Okay. So it looks like a second application didn't really do much to this. So this is the Downy Wrinkle Releaser. Right there. Okay, for this next one, it is a company called Acorn. And this is a pressing liquid that you use in a pen. And so what you'll do with this is you won't do the entire fabric, but rather you just press it right onto the seam, and that will make it so that the seams are nice and flat. And I've been anxious to try this kind of product out. And then these come with these nibs, and in this kit where it was the pen and the bottle of solution, they had 2 extra refill nibs. So I guess those wear down over a certain amount of use. I got this from the local quilt shop, and the clerk told me that I can just bring this bottle in empty anytime and get it refilled for a fraction of the price. So that's good to know. That might be something that's helpful to know. And then it's got a pretty nice little applicator, so I can just put this, I can unscrew the bottom of this, and then I can just put that right in. Okay. Oh, wow. That filled up really fast, actually. Oh, okay. It's kind of leaking everywhere, which is unfortunate because this stuff was kind of pricey, actually. So, okay. And then I'm guessing this does travel down into the nib. Okay, I'm thinking the nib... Okay, it does feel like maybe the nib is getting wet. Okay. Okay. All right, so I think this just goes on like this. Ooh. Okay, real flat on the black side, so I'm going to see if I can get a little bit more liquid over here in the hopes that that will make the muslin side really nice and flat. Okay. So that is the Acorn Easy Press pen. And it feels like it's lightly starched here. Okay, so Acorn pen. All right, this next one is cornstarch. this is the first of the home remedies. The way that you do the cornstarch, you can have this mixed up cold, but then you have to shake it all the time. And so what I did was I boiled it up, and I just basically made it up like I would make a cornstarch for food, for like making a gravy. So what I did was I went with a half of a tablespoon for 2/3 of a cup of water. And so to do that, I had 1/3 of a cup in a really super tiny saucepan, like what you might have for melting butter. And then I had 1/3 of a cup of water that was cold in a measuring cup. And then I added the cornstarch to that, mixed it into a slurry, and then waited for the water to boil. And then once the water was boiling, then I added this to it, the slurry to it. And that ended up coming out like this. And so, let's see. So you can see it's pretty liquidy. And so for this, I need spray bottles. And so these are a couple of spray bottles that I bought at Hobby Lobby. And then I'm just going to go ahead and fill this. Let's see, a little bit of a skin on there, since I mixed it up this afternoon and let it cool. Okay. So that's that. Yep. And then, of course, you can dial up or down the strength as you need, but this was more like the recipe that I saw on several different sites. Okay, I'm going to saturate this pretty well to see how that behaves. And so this is definitely a solution for anyone who wants to have this be natural. You could choose to not have any fragrance to it by simply not adding any, or you could add like some kind of essential oil. And I'm just using parchment on here. I don't think parchment is necessary, but I'm just doing that because I saturated it pretty well and it felt kind of slimy, actually. So, okay. And so with this method, I am seeing a lot of residue on the black. There's quite a lot of residue on the black. Okay. Actually, that worked really well. This is probably a medium stiffness. So I would imagine if you use a little bit more starch, like maybe a full tablespoon for 1 cup of water, something like that, that would probably work pretty well. But you can see there's residue there on the black. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so that was cornstarch. For this next one, this is another home remedy. This is just a little trial size vodka that I got at the liquor store. And fun fact about vodka, professional costumers like to use this as an odor eliminator for their theater costumes and their production costumes. And so even if this isn't something that you feel like using as a starch, this could be great as something that would take the odors out of fabric. And since it is alcohol, it'll do a certain amount of disinfecting as well. I'm going to mix up the vodka solution, which is a 2-to-1 part, 2 parts distilled water, 1 part vodka. And these are really small bottles, so... And the reason why I'm using distilled water is because we have very hard water. Okay, trying to get that fairly saturated. And there's kind of a faint whiff of the alcohol, but vodka is not one of those alcohols that has a huge smell to it. For the people who have sensitivities to fragrance, that might be a good shot. Okay. And then the alcohol actually made it dry a bit fast when I did the pressing. Okay. So this is still pretty floppy. I'm going to go ahead and do a second spraying to this to see if that impacts. Okay. Okay. So, still a lot of stretchiness in the bias. But it does do a great job of getting the seam down nice and flat there. Okay, so vodka. The next one I want to try out is aerosol hairspray. The reasoning behind hairspray is because if it makes it so that your hair stays in place, then it's probably going to make it to where the fabric is going to have a certain amount of taking out the flexibility type of thing. This one's actually kind of like the lowest hold. So I would imagine that if you had like the highest hold of hairspray, it might be a little bit different, but this just happened to be what I had on hand. It doesn't say anything about shaking the can. Ooh, oh boy. That is really... Oh my goodness. Because it's an aerosol, it's really got quite a powerful smell in the air now. Okay. Oh, boy, okay. Now, the number one ingredient on this hairspray is alcohol. And that was mentioned as something to be careful of if you have fabrics that might bleed. So, probably would want to do a test from what I saw in the article that I was reading. And that makes sense. It really sticks to the iron. That could be, oops, very annoying. Especially if you don't want to burn yourself. Okay, man, this is very sticky. Okay, I'm gonna use the parchment for this. There we go. See if we can get the rest of this to work okay. Okay. Oh, wow. So this actually does have quite a lot of starching ability to it. And then the seam is also pressed very, very flat. So in a pinch, if you don't have any starch on hand, you ran out, this could work really well. So that's hairspray. And I think with hairspray, you definitely want to use the parchment, because that seemed like that was really annoying, actually. For this next one, this says it's peel starch. Actually, what it's called these days is simply starch. And I determined that by looking on here and seeing those Awesomex LLC, and then going on to Amazon, because you can't find it under this name, but Simply Starch is put out by Awesomex. And looking at the product description, I'm reasonably certain that it's the same formulation, same product. So what this is a dry starch powder. So it's a dry starch powder. And it's pretty simple to mix up. It says 2 teaspoons with 16 ounces of water, so I'll have to figure out what it needs to be from that part. And that's okay, and that's to do a sprayer. And I think that would be more if it was regular ironing. But crochet and quilt projects, you want to do 1 part to 10 parts water to make the liquid starch. So that's the recipe that I'm going to go with, is the 1 part to 10 parts. And that's usually what I do with this. Okay, so now that I have my container, I'm going to measure out. So we have 1 teaspoon of the starch. I need 10 teaspoons of the distilled water. Every tablespoon is 3 teaspoons, so I think that'll make it easier. Here's 1, 2, 3, And then 1 tiny little teaspoon. And then I'm just going to mix this in. Okay. Let's go. Okay. And this has got a lot of residue. Just something to be mindful of. And usually what I do with this is I will put it into a container and I will dunk the entire piece into it. And then just kind of brush it off. But I'm going to test what this is like for spraying, because that tends to be what we quilters do. Okay, let's see if I can get that just a little bit flatter. Okay. Okay, it is going out of the sprayer. It's a little... Yeah, I think at that concentration it might jam up a bit. So... And then because of my experience with this, I'm going to go ahead and use the parchment. Okay. Ooh. Okay. So there's quite a lot of residue, as you can see. Oops, trying to peel it up. Stuck to the paper towel. So there's quite a lot of residue on the black there. I mean, there's even a little flaky bit there. But this does end up creating a very almost papery type of feel to the fabric. And so, yeah, there's no give whatsoever when it comes to the bias. So I'm going to call that the dry starch. So for the next starch alternative, I'm going to try out using school glue. This is actually a clear version of school glue. I do have regular school glue, but I'm going to try out clear to see if maybe that works better on the black fabric. And the recipes I've seen for this, one recipe is a 1-to-1 ratio, and they say to dunk it. Given that it's concentrated glue, I think that's probably not going to be a good idea. Another recipe was saying something like 1 tablespoon for 2 cups of water. That seems too diluted. So I'm going to try a 4-to-1 with this and see how this works, because I think that might be a nice happy medium. So I have 1 tablespoon, I have 1/2 tablespoon measure. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then one of the sites that mentioned the 1-to-1 ratio said that after you do this, that the glue won't wash out of the fabric. Now, I'm not so sure about that, because I've used this glue as a resist and dyeing projects, and you have to kind of do some scrubbing, but it will wash out after it's been fully dried. So I am not sure what those guys are talking about, and I don't fully believe it. So to have a 4-to-1, I just need 2 of these. Okay. Okay. Still have a little bit of glue on there, but I think it's okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, and then I'm just going to shake this up to really get the glue incorporated with the water. Okay, oops, starting to leak a little bit. And it doesn't feel sticky on the leaking, so that I think is a good sign. And then I think on this, because it is glue, that I am going to use the parchment again. So here we go. Okay. Let's see. Had to do some extra sprays to that just to clear the water that was in that nozzle line. Okay. Okay. Let's see how that still has some dampness to it, but most of that moisture is out. So now school glue can actually be very useful in quilting projects. If you are trying to have a curved seam, then I find it very useful for being able to join the concave and convex parts together, and then letting that dry in the seam line and then stitching it, and that actually is quite effective. And then the nice thing about it is that the fabric will pull apart pretty easily. Oh, so this is very nice and flat on the seam. It does have a certain amount of stiffness or crispness, if you will. And there's a little bit of residue on the black, but not nearly as much as some of the other methods. Okay, so this is 4-to-1 glue. For my final method, we have this from the Quilt Shop, my favorite thimble. This is a starch and press solution for applique. So I'm not sure how well this is going to work in this application with the half square triangles, but it has probably some pretty good uses for the applique, and the directions were saying about how you wanted to do the applique more on the edges. Part of what I like about this is that it says that it's archival quality and acid free, and so that's not something you usually see mentioned with any kind of starch method. So that to me sounded like that was actually pretty good. Now this comes dry, you have to add water to it. So it says 4 ounces of hot tap water to the starch bottle. So I'm going to go ahead and get some hot water. Okay, so now that I have everything, it says I need to add 4 ounces of hot tap water. So I have an osmosis filter, so that kind of helps. Unfortunately, this funnel does not fit right in the thing, so I'll have to be careful about this. Okay. Alright. And then I'm going to see if I can squeeze this. Ah, okay. Kind of a rubbery thing to the nozzle. Okay. So this needs to be shaken. Okay. So that just has to be shaken, not stirred. Okay. And then I'm supposed to activate the sponge by pressing that into a plate, but I'm going to press it into this. Let's see, I don't have anything yet. Nothing. So I don't know if I can get over the setup issues. I like the idea of this applicator, I just can't seem to get it to work. I don't know why. I mean, okay. I wonder if there's something on this, something blocking this applicator. That would explain things. Oops. Let me see if there's anything blocking. I don't see anything. I mean, it's like it's just a hard rubber thing there. I don't know how there's any porousness to it. This is very confusing. Okay, well, since I can't seem to get this to work, I'm going to put this into a spray bottle instead. Okay, so I thought I was done with spray bottles, but apparently I'm not. I'm going to take this solution and put it into a spray bottle because I cannot seem to get that not to work. Okay. It's got a very milky kind of look to that solution. And this is something that I got in the quilt shop. Okay. This does not want to come out of my spray nozzle. I don't know, because I'm not totally... There we go. Okay, woo. Alright, we got that really saturated. Okay. Oh boy. Okay. Okay. So, on this, okay, this does actually have a very firm, crisp kind of finish to it. There is a lot of residue on the black. The seam here looks really nice and pressed down, so that's a nice thing. And I'm guessing that with this, because you use it on applique, that really this part is more like what's kind of the important thing. If you can get past the technical difficulties, this could be a pretty good option. Okay, Thimble. For an overall review of the stiffness of these particular methods, this is the control piece, which I had with the water and doing the wood clapper. And so for the first one, that's the Niagara, and these two in comparison to each other. And so how I am rating it is I'm rating the stiffness on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is absolutely nothing at all. That's the same as the control. And 5 would be the most stiff, so that would be like a very flat kind of cardstock. And so these two together, looking at them in comparison, I rate the Niagara at a 2. And then the next one was the Luxe finish by Faultless. And putting these two together, the Luxe I rated at a 3, so it has just a tiny bit more stiffness to it. Next up is the Best Press. That one is very similar to the Luxe finish, so I rated that one as a 3 as well. And then after that is the Terial Magic, and the Terial Magic, as expected, does not really flop at all. So that one is rated as a 5. So that's the maximum stiffness there. And then Spray and Bond Fabric Stiffener. That one also, as expected, it doesn't really flop. And so that one is rated as a 5 as well. And then the Downy Wrinkle Releaser. And this one is rated as a 1, so it seems to have pretty much no stiffening to it whatsoever in comparison. Might be about a 1.5, but I'm putting it as a 1. After that one is the Acorn Easy Press Pen with the accompanying solution. And that one, like I mentioned before, is not an all-over fabric kind of a treatment, but rather is a treatment to the seam. But even kind of looking at it with just the seam, that would definitely be a 1. Even with the relative flatness of the seam, I think that the water or the control is actually a little bit flatter than the Acorn. Next up would be the cornstarch, the food-grade cornstarch. That one turned out pretty stiff. So this one I've rated as a 4 because it's not quite as stiff as the Terial Magic or the Spray and Bond Stiffener, but it's still pretty stiff. Next up is the Vodka. The Vodka I have rated as a 1. There is no stiffness to that at all. And then after that, I have the Hairspray. And the Hairspray was very surprising. It was actually one of the stiffest things that I had for results. So this is definitely a 5. And then after that is this Dry Starch, which you can get under the brand name Simply Starch these days. So the Dry Starch ended up being a 4. After that one is the School Glue, and the School Glue has a pretty good amount of stiffness. I have the School Glue down as a 4, so it's got a pretty good amount of stiffness to it. And then the last product is my favorite Thimble starch for applique. And that one I have down as a 4.5. So it's got a pretty good amount of stiffness to it, but it's not the maximum amount of stiffness. For other ratings on the smell, so for those people who are concerned about fragrance, you probably want to steer clear of the Niagara and the Luxe finish, and then also the Downy. So these are not too surprising because they're more of like a commercial laundry treatment for clothes. So usually that stuff is going to have a lot of fragrance. And then the Hairspray as well, because that was an aerosol. I actually felt like I was having a little bit of trouble with the fragrance on that. That was a bit overwhelming. Everything else did not really have a smell to it. Or if it did, it was very faint and it went away really fast. And actually on all of these, they don't have a smell hours after they've been ironed. And then in terms of whether these have really flat seams, every single thing had a really flat seam, except ironically the Acorn pen. which was the only purpose of that one. And the woman at the quilt shop, she said that this was her favorite thing to use and was very emphatic about it. I really hoped that this one would actually be better than it turned out to be. And now I'm going to rate these worst to the best. And so the worst one is the Acorn. So that one comes in at number 13 for me. And then number 12 is the Vodka. Number 11 is the Downy Wrinkle Releaser. Number 10 is the Mary Ellen's Best Press. And mostly that, I mean, there's like a little bit of a hold to it. Mostly my decision on that one is because I feel like it's just really overpriced for the value that it delivers as a starch. And so number 9 is the My Favorite Thimble. And the only reason why I was that kind to it was because it does have a pretty good amount of hold, actually. At number 8 is the Niagara, and the only reason why that one's not rated higher for me is because there's a lot of residue on the black. And that one was like the second most residue out of all 13. And then number 7 is the Luxe. So these were the two Faultless company starches. So the Luxe finished there. I got that one at number 7. It beat out the Niagara just because there's really no residue on that Luxe. And then number 6 is the dry starch, or what would be simply starch these days. And so that one is kind of high up in the ratings just because for what you want starch for, at least what I want starch for, it does a really great job of that. And I can also dilute it down and it still works really well. But it does have the most residue. And so if you're not planning on washing your project after you complete it, then that can be definitely a deal breaker. Okay, number 5 was the Hairspray. I was very surprised at how much I liked the Hairspray. The Hairspray is actually really effective. What I don't like about it was the aerosol and the fragrance. It was very overwhelming. And so I think it could be worthwhile to experiment with a hairspray that is a non-aerosol. And that could be a really good economical option. Also, a nice thing about Hairspray is frequently you can find these in the travel section. And so if you like to go on vacation and take some quilting stuff with you, this could be a great option for that. And then coming in at number 4 is the glue. And that one I mixed up as 4 parts water to 1 part glue. And that actually was really good for providing a good amount of stiffness. Really excellent for the seam there as well. And there was a little bit of residue, but very, very minor. And I don't know if that was because I used clear, so maybe it's better to use clear than to use the white glue. I really don't know. But I had that one come in at 4. And then at number 3 was the food grade cornstarch. I was actually surprised at how much I liked that one as well. I felt like this one was very effective. Like the glue, there's a small amount of residue, so it kind of depends. If you want absolutely zero residue, then that might be a deal breaker too. It was really great on the seam as well, and I just felt like this one had an extremely good value to it. It's probably the best value for the cost. And then coming in at number 2 is the Terial Magic. And the only reason why that one is not number 1 is because it is a little pricey, coming in at $15 for a spray bottle. But it is extremely good. And this is going to be really, really great for whatever projects that you need to do where you want to stiffen that fabric. And then, of course, that leaves number 1 being the Spray and Bond Fabric Stiffener. And this one completely surprised me, but that's a really nice, pleasant surprise. It is expensive, but I would suggest definitely trying to make sure that you get that on sale. You might also want to look online because maybe it's cheaper that way. So I hope this has been a helpful video with all of these different starch methods. And please check out this video where I show the method that I like best for treating my rulers so they don't slip. Thanks for watching.